Next up, we're going to have a look at a neat tool that SAS Studio has to let us see the effect on the chance of churning of some of these variables. Under Options and Plots, we're not going to need the ROC plot this time, so we'll leave that just to speed things up and add in this effect plot. I'm going to hit run and show you what we get here. This is going to give us a plot showing the chance that people are going to churn. It's all the way down at the bottom here. Concentrating on just one particular variable at a time. Okay, so the variable we're looking at here, for better or worse, is international calls. This is going to assume that all of the continuous variables have their average value. So that's these guys here. And for each of the categorical variables, it's going to give you a different curve describing the chance of churning, this probability of churning, for each of those different levels of the categorical variables. So pay attention first to this green line here. The green line is this guy here. It says yes and 0. What that means is that it's a yes for international plan and a no for voicemail plan. So this green curve is saying that when we have an international plan and we don't have a voicemail plan, if we don't make any international calls, we're actually really likely to churn, really likely to leave. Maybe we could make some sense of that. We have an international plan, so we're being charged for these international calls, but we're not actually making international calls. Makes us more likely to leave than if we didn't have the international plan. I don't know why that makes sense with voicemail plan, but there we are. Okay, so this isn't the graph, though, that I'm particularly interested in. I'd be more interested in looking at those variables that we saw as being important that we used the polynomial terms on, so total charge and customer service calls. How do we get those graphs? Because over here we've only got the graph for international calls. Well, there's a little trick that you can use. Under these model effects, whatever's the top one on the list is going to give us the graph for that variable. So if we move total charge up to the top of the list here by just clicking this up arrow and press OK and rerun our model, it's going to give us exactly the same output except for changing that one graph. So we'll scroll down to the bottom and see that graph for the effect of total charge on the chance of churning with all of our other continuous variables at their average levels. And we've got the same comparisons here for international plan and voicemail plan. Let's concentrate on the green one again, where we do have an international plan and we don't have a voicemail plan. That's the one where we're most likely to leave. So what does this say? It says that when we have a very, very low total charge, we have almost no chance of leaving. I think, from memory, that there aren't very many people with this sort of total charge in the data. Then as we hit around $40 per month, we have a higher chance of churning. Funnily enough, that actually decreases as our total charge increases until we hit about $60. And then our chance of churning goes up really fast. By the time we hit about $80 a month, we're very, very likely to churn. And that just keeps on increasing as our total charge gets higher and higher. Okay, so maybe that makes some sense to you. It's definitely something you could describe in a report, exactly how the total charge is affecting our chance of churning. Okay, let's see if we can do the same for customer service calls. So we'll move that up to the top. You should think before we hit run what we're going to get here. What do you think we're going to get? probably more customer service calls means more likely to churn, right? There we are. Alright, so this one's a little bit weird. One of the features of polynomial modeling is that outside the range of observed data we can have some very strange things happen, and so that's what's happened down at the very bottom here. Since we never see fewer than 0 customer service calls, it doesn't really matter what's happening out here, that as we got more customer service calls we're less likely to churn. That's just not really the case because we can't have fewer than 0. So really, if we're comparing 0, 1, 2, 3 customer service calls, we've got about the same probability. But then once we hit 2, I guess it is, as we get more customer service calls, we have this higher chance of churning until it peaks at around 6, 7, 8 calls, 9 calls, and then in theory drops off after that, but in the data we never see any more than 9 calls. So really what's happening is that if we have 0, 1, 2 customer service calls, our chance of churning is pretty low, and then it starts to increase as we get 3, 4, 5 customer service calls, and then once we hit about 6 or so, we're very, very likely to churn. That's where our chance of churning is maximized at around 7 or 8 calls.